Greetings, one and all. We're back. It is the summer, and as David Prutton keeps telling me, it's the off-season, Bab. Well, at Hull City, there's no such thing, is there? So we thought we'd better convene for a 1904 club special to kind of reflect on where things are. And I must admit, I did think that when I scheduled this podcast that we would have white smoke from the MKM Stadium. But alas, at the time of recording, that has not happened. We still await the appointment of the new manager. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about him, what's going to happen, where City are at. And it's the 10th of June. Most people are on holiday, but Hull City never sleeps, does it? So I'm joined this morning by Kathryn, fresh from her foray into Europe with the England women's team. How are you, Kathryn?
I'm all right, thanks, Baz. As I was saying to you earlier, no one's retired in the last, 5 days or so. So we're doing all right on that front. Although, hopefully, I've not tempted fate.
I was going to say that you might get an alert in the next hour or so to say somebody else has fallen over. Fletch, it's been a long time, dear. How the devil are you?
It has. Just sort of just sitting in the background trying to unravel what on earth is going on at another football club that isn't Hull City at the moment. But we need to try and unravel what's going on here, don't we? Because even though it sounds like it's all set in stone, there's lot to talk about Mr. Jakirovic.
There is. So from what I've just said, you'll gather that Prutz isn't here. Prutz is very lucky. He's basically gets 3 months off. Once the championship playoff final's done and dusted, he does a bit of UEFA stuff, and then he puts his trotters up for 3 months. How lovely. I should also say, Burnsy can't be with us today either because Burnsy's unfortunately he's not been well for a few weeks now, and for those that watch City on the club's official website will know that he didn't do the last two games. He didn't do the Derby game nor the Portsmouth game through illness. So we send our best wishes to Captain Burnsy. He's really not well, bless him. He's really struggling. So, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of City fans in saying that we all send our best wishes to him, and hopefully he's back on his feet soon and can get back to being involved in Hull City because I know he misses it terribly. So yeah, get well soon, Burnsy. We do miss you a bit, a little bit, only a tiny bit. Yeah,
just a smidge.
Just a bit. Anyway, moving on to the manager situation. So it's 5 weeks or so since the end of the championship season. 3 weeks it'll be or so since Ruben Sayas was issued with his P45. Still no white smoke emanating from the MKM Stadium. We do understand it's close. It hasn't been announced yet that Sergej Jakirovic is going to take over. We had confirmation on Monday that he'd left Kayserispor in the Turkish Super League. There is there's some, not issue necessarily, but there's some situation with his contract that needs to be resolved. I believe just a relative technicality. Everything is in place to announce him and his assistants. There's no hold up from the Hull City side of it. I know in a lot of time fans give the club stick for being really slow at announcing things, but ultimately they can't announce things until contracts are signed. And as we record on Tuesday morning, the contract has not been signed yet. So that's nothing to do with staff at Hull City just delaying it, thinking, well, we might announce it here, we might announce it there. They can't announce something until the ink on the contract is proverbially dry. So we just wait now. As we expect it to be done. Everything's in place, as I say, for Sergej and his coaching staff, and we expect a press conference. Unlikely now next week, but likely the week after. So that is what we are expecting. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I think it needs. We saw last year that the fact that everything was so slow, and it was like, Volta can start whenever. Volta could start on July the 1st. It's fine, and there's no rush. Well, we found out to their detriment why they were almost punished royally for that. So that they need to hit the ground running quickly. They've got to get a shift on because they're going to be behind the 8 ball. Kathryn, Jakirovic, we know it's him. We've known now for quite a while that it's likely to be him. What's your thoughts on the appointment? Obviously every managerial appointment, whether he comes from England, from Azerbaijan or Timbuk 6, is a risk. But what's your feeling?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't want to kind of judge somebody before, A, he's signed a contract and B, a ball's been kicked. I think last time we all spoke, the general feeling of us was that we kind of wanted to see somebody with a bit of championship experience, just because of the fact, the club just narrowly avoided relegation. You just wanted that kind of feeling of not safety, because you're never going to 100% have that, but just that kind of idea that someone's going to be coming in with a bit of, backing kind of behind them, in the sense of they know the division a little bit, and that you kind of, hoped that that would be the route that the club would go down. Obviously, it became clear that that wasn't the route the club was going to go down. And the concern, obviously, is that Ajan's track record of appointing managers without any championship experience hasn't gone particularly well. Schotter, obviously, didn't go well. Tim Walter didn't go well. Maybe this is third time lucky with Sergej, whose name I'm still trying to learn how to pronounce properly. But I just hope that lessons have been learned from last season. I'm not convinced that they have. And I think all the fans, I think, are going to have a little bit of trepidation with kind of going into the new season, just because of what's gone before. However, like I say, we can't judge the guy before he's actually already started, and he's not Tim Walter. As much as we can compare the situations, he is a different manager and a different person, and hopefully he's going to kind of have a bit more of a normal pre-season than Tim Walter had, a little bit more support in the transfer market, and maybe he's not going to be kind of starting the season with his hands tied behind his back a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of fear, just because of the route that Ajan's gone down before, and it feels like he's kind of gone off on his own again. But hopefully, he's managed to sort of pick a diamond out of the rough this time, and but it's really hard to know how it's going to go until he starts, because it's another manager that we don't really know much about as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And it is as I say, it is a risk, Fletch, and given what happened with Volta, maybe if Volta didn't happen and it wasn't such a catastrophic disaster, both in terms of the way the style of football, the way it ended with the relationship or lack of it between the manager and the supporters, the way that Volta alienated a lot of the dressing room. If that hadn't have happened, would there be less kind of trepidation and about this appointment, do you think, or would there still be, because it's one from left field? Perhaps because it's a guy. Yes, he's not Turkish, but he's plucked in from the Turkish Super League. Is that would there be less trepidation from fans and everybody, and also general casual observers of Hull City around the Championship? Pundits and people that are looking at City thinking they're a bit of a basket case, run by an owner that really hasn't got a clue what he's doing. Is that? Some would say that's grossly unfair. Some would say it's entirely fair. And he's a feelings guy that he plucks. He doesn't necessarily listen to those around him. He goes on what he wants. Is that where are you at with this whole thing?
Well, the thing that I pick up on is the very last thing that you said there, Baz, when you say that Ajan is a feelings when it comes to appointments. And for Jakirovic, the maths, which is something that I'm more interested in, is quite positive, because at Kayserispor, he only had 17 games in charge, but he completely turned them around with points per game of 1.71, which is impressive for that division. And then the 4 previous clubs before there, granted, most of them are top-end elites in their respected countries and divisions. So Zagreb, Rijeka, Mostar, Maribor, he's done very, very well. So for Jakirovic on paper, it's the same as Volta, in the sense of Volta seemed to be pretty good at where he'd been previously, but then wasn't able to transfer that into Championship football. I think Volta's the reason why he fell on his sword in the end was he didn't want to change. He didn't want to change tactically. However, from the conversations I've had with journalists over in Croatia, it actually sounds pretty positive that Jakirovic is adaptable, and Jakirovic will change if things need to change. And granted, we'll come on to the coaching situation in a moment, it sounds like he's going to be bringing in a lot of bodies around him to help him, which I think is also another good thing. I do understand the anxiety, the nervousness about a manager coming in from abroad from some of the faithful, but I would argue that there are plenty of foreign managers who have come to the Championship and been successful at some point. Now, whether it's a Reggie Labrie who's done it in one season, or a Daniel Farke or a Thomas Frank who's needed a couple of seasons to bed in, I don't think it's as obvious to, and try to think of the correct wording, but we shouldn't really be looking negatively at the fact that he's from abroad and has no Championship experience. For me, it's what he's doing on the training ground, what he's putting on the tactics board, and how his relationships will be with players. Now, some of us, like yourself, Baz, get the opportunity to probably deep dive and get to see that firsthand sometimes when you watch training. You know, Mike White, when you go out to Turkey as well, get to see it all happen. I think that will be a much clearer indication. And then it'll be your duty, our duty, to be able to basically give our thoughts on what that'll be like. So to summarise, yeah, I do understand where it comes from for some supporters, but I think Jakirovic needs that opportunity to be able to showcase what he can do. And from my point of view, the numbers look good. The conversations I've had with journalists in Croatia suggest it's not like Volta. Even though he plays attacking football, he's adaptable to change. So I'm actually, now that a bit of homework's been done with him, I'm actually pretty confident. It's a question of, can he now transfer it into the English game?
That's the thing, Kathryn, isn't it? I think we spoke to people out in Germany 12 months ago to try and understand what Tim was like, about his character, about his style of football. And I think it was fair to say at that point there were red flags about what he was like. And obviously, being privileged as we were to be out in Turkey during pre-season, those red flags were apparent again. Yes, there was some, shoots of optimism with some bits, but overall the concern was there, particularly, and also given that the players he had at his disposal, in fairness to him. Conversely, 12 months on, speaking to people out in Croatia and out in Turkey as well about Sergej, completely chalk and cheese, very different approaches, very different managers. It does seem a lot more positive in terms of the way he approaches it, the way he is with his players. The biggest negative, if there is one, that's come across my desk about the new guy, is that he doesn't hang around for very long. He will move on. For me, that's if he leaves Hull City in a better place than when he inherits it, and he moves on and he uses it as a stepping stone to get a bigger job in England. Fine, that's just how people work. That's football. That's life in general. People are always using generally opportunities in employment to get to better themselves. But as long as he improves Hull City as a football club and as a football team, I don't really have a problem with that. But I think generally the feeling is, I have to say, more positive about Sergej's approach. Does that fill you with a bit more confidence? Than perhaps it did what we heard about Volta?
It does, but I think it all depends what players he has to work with as well, doesn't it? Because as much as we kind of did criticise Volta, he also didn't have a great squad. He didn't have a great transfer window. Ruben Sayers was meant to be kind of this guy that was great for players and got on really well with his team, and I think we saw that, but it still didn't always translate into results because the squad just wasn't good enough. And you could say part of that was because of the football Ruben was playing, but I think he had a good connection with the players. He just couldn't, for whatever reason, get enough out of them at times. And I think that's going to be the question of Jakirovic, is whether it might be that he has a good bond with the players, but are they good enough to play in the Championship? Who is he going to be able to bring in? Is he going to have money to spend? Is it going to be kind of a tight purse this summer? Is it going to be kind of trying to utilize the loan market? Are the players that we're going to bring in are going to have Championship experience, or are we going to look at divisions that he's managed in before? Because naturally some of the players we've signed from different divisions previously haven't always gone down well. I'm thinking of Cynic as the obvious one. But I think there's so many kind of unknowns at the minute that it's really kind of difficult to form an opinion. However, I do think, all people can do is get behind him. And while, as I say, I do think there will be more kind of trepidation than I was with Tim Walter. I think there was not much was known about Tim Walter, but I do think at the start people did get behind him just because it was a new manager, and as much as they were kind of sad to see Rosinha go, people did get behind him. I just slightly concerned that because of what's gone before, the minute kind of things go badly, he's going to be under a lot of pressure. And Tim Walter was under pressure as well, but I do think he got a little bit longer, not longer than he should have. But it took them ages to win a game last season. And yes, there was kind of like criticism at the time, but it wasn't really until kind of end of October, November where people really started to kind of turn on him. I just hope that doesn't come sooner for Jakirovic if things don't go well at the start, because as soon as that happens, you're sort of fighting a losing battle.
Fletch, in terms of the owner, because obviously he's come under a lot of criticism, particularly in the last 12 months for sacking Liam, for how the Tim situation played out, the way things are being operated behind the scenes. There's a lot of uncertainty. Obviously, we had the late payment. It wasn't late in the sense that it was still under contract, but they were paid under the terms of their contract. But there are murmurings of, and there have been for a long time, of things behind the scenes that it's not all rosy behind the scenes. Obviously, we had the Tan debacle and various other things. Is that the concern, that yes, you've got a new manager, but everything else behind the scenes remains the same? Ultimately, you've got an owner who makes all the decisions, and you've got people in post. You've got respected, experienced people in post that perhaps aren't being utilised and maybe aren't being listened to, or are, but their opinion is kind of just brushed away. And ultimately, it's one guy who makes all the decisions. Is that a legitimate concern that some fans have got?
I think it is, because from the way that the club operates when it comes to transfers, from the sounds of things, especially under Shota Arveladze, Tim Walter, maybe a bit with Ruben as well, it sounds like Adrian and the Brain team are the ones who do all the transfer dealings and make sure that all the paperwork's signed, that kind of thing. And there's not really too much input from some of the coaches that have been here whilst Adrian has been the ruler of the football club. And I think the test will be to see how the transfer business plays out, to really tell us exactly what is going on internally with Hull City. Because if it turns out a little bit like last year, to be a situation where they use an excuse of the European Championships delayed them in signing players, we might have if something like that comes about again, where they aren't really, there isn't too much of a plan. I'm sincerely hoping that the new head of recruitment irons all that out and takes it with an iron fist, because he's experienced with Championship football clubs, knows how the market should operate. So if even with him in charge, and there's still a little bit of uncertainty going on or delays in players coming in, then that for me is a red flag. We'll come on to, I think, transfers in a little while, but a question I want to raise, because some of the fans have raised it, Baz, if you're happy to divulge, if it's possible to divulge, is one or two people are asking who else was a front runner for the majority of this process, and who did Jakirovic beat to the post?
Well, we know obviously there was the talk about Emre, and how that all came out, and he was interviewed, but it became, I think, plainly obvious that just wasn't possible due to his background. And Adrian obviously did his interview with Mike and explained that, and I had lengthy conversations with him at the time as well about it. And look, he's got his reasons for that, and people will have their own opinion. But ultimately, the right decision was made that he wasn't appointed. Michael Beale was interviewed. He really wanted the job. but I think he fell by the wayside. There were other people that obviously Alex Neil, and I said this at Christmas, Alex Neil gave, by all accounts, a mind-blowing presentation his interview before Ruben got the job. There was Miron Muslic. I know Plymouth fans got a bit antsy when it was suggested that Muslic could be potentially wanting to come to Hull City. Well, obviously he's flown the nest there and he's gone to Schalke. He was very, very keen on the job. But I think, as I say, and there were one or two others. I mean, as I said before, Steve Cooper was never realistic, and I think I'd put, with respect to Hull City, the Middlesbrough job is more attractive at this stage, I would say, than Hull City. When you look at the stability of the football club and the squad that you're inheriting, Middlesbrough is a more attractive. At this stage is a far more attractive job than Hull City, and Cooper's ruled himself out of the Borough job seemingly. So that was never realistic. I think Gary O'Neill was. I know Gary O'Neill was mentioned, but again, I think that was pie in the sky. I don't think that Gary O'Neill was ever going to go from managing Wolves in the Premier League to Hull City at the bottom of the Championship. One or two other people were looked at. I think they looked at. I mean, right. I know Ryan Mason's name was mentioned. I don't think it ever got anywhere, but I know he was a name that they talked about. Obviously, now Ryan has gone in for his first job at West Bromwich Albion. But from conversations with the owner at various points, I think Jakirovic became to him his number one choice. After it became, I think Jakirovic was in his background, but Emre was his first choice. That obviously was impossible for all the reasons we know about, and the fact that Emre has a checkered past with racism, was convicted, and whether the owner can argue or not about whether he is a racist or he isn't, he was convicted of racism. That appointment in England was never going to fly, and rightly so. I think throughout the process, in Acun's head, it was always going to be. He always wanted Jakirovic. He'd seen what he did in Turkey. I think initially he felt that Jakirovic was too expensive, that the numbers just didn't work. But obviously, once Acun is the kind of guy that once he gets an idea in his head, as I said to you before, he's a feelings guy. I'm not convinced that the process of appointing Jakirovic is the right one, because you do your due diligence, you look at candidates, you interview them, you speak to people around them that have played under them, that have worked with them, all that type of stuff that goes similar to bringing in players, or it should do. I don't think that necessarily happened. I just think Acun got a feeling that he'd seen what he did in Turkey, spoken to one or two people around, and decided that was the guy he wanted. That he believed that was the guy that could come in. So, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think everybody's wary, and rightly so. And I think the point that Kathryn raises, the point that you raise about what this manager should look like, given what has just happened, I think the sensible money would have been on an Alex Neil type of appointment. Obviously, he's now signed a new long-term contract at Millwall, but I'm not convinced. But I'm not convinced. I don't know if I'm not convinced because of the Volta effect, or if I'm just not convinced because this guy is say flake is a bit harsh probably, but he's had a couple of years at Zagreb, which is a huge job, by the way, in Croatia. Let's not forget that. He's had bits and pieces everywhere else, and he's done it. He's got he averages nearly 2 points a game. He's got to translate that now into Hull City, and this is a very difficult job because of what happened last season. The mechanics of how things operate behind the scenes. He's got a squad that I think it's fair to say will need convincing, because there's members of that squad that were played under Liam, and were shocked when Liam was relieved of his duties. Were shocked with Volta, and just aren't necessarily convinced about how things are going to go. And I get that. Kathryn, I want to ask you this. Is that something that players will be concerned about? Is that about the churning managers? I know Hull City aren't the only club that sack managers, but is that a thing that players will be bothered about? That it's another new manager, it's more upheaval, it's another first day at school, it's another long summer of having to impress a new manager, learn a new style, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it depends how quickly the players take to him, isn't it? That's going to be key. And what we kind of have to hope is that this kind of, what people have said about Jakirovic, and the fact that he he can have a really good relationship with his players, and that he gets them on side, and then that's a big thing that he's good at. We have to hope he brings that over to the squad, and it's also up to the players to buy into it as well. As much as I could appreciate their frustration at the churn in managers, and some of them probably quite like Ruben. Had that moment at the end of the season staying up. They also, that this is the nature of professional football, isn't it? They've got to try and they've got to buy into the manager and buy into his style of football. And I think they did try to do that under Tim Voss. You could question how much they tried to do it. I do think they did try at the start, and I think after a while they just thought this is not working. And naturally, I think the relationship between Walter and the players obviously deteriorated. So you just kind of hope that the players do, as you say, they should all want to impress him when he comes in. It doesn't really matter who it is. They should all want to impress the new manager equally, though he's got to impress them. So it's it's sort of two ways, isn't it? And yeah, I mean, it's strange. I was looking into Jakirovic, obviously that kind of period when he was at Zagreb. Obviously, he got him into the Champions League, and I think he left not long after that, kind of thrashing from Bayern Munich when Harry Kane scored about 4 or 5 goals in one game. And I think it was kind of like painted as mutual consent, sort of. But I kind of looked at it and thought, was it a bit harsh to sort of, he got them into the Champions League to sort of then sack them, but they do win the league, and they're like, I don't think they've won it this season, but most years they do tend to win the league. So potentially that wasn't actually that impressive that he got them into the Champions League. So it was, I don't know how much to kind of read into the fact that he's not been at clubs for a long period of time. I don't know whether he would have stayed there had that gone a bit better, and with how much it was kind of him leaving, or how much of it was kind of losing 9-2 to Bayern Munich and then sort of mutually agreeing to give him the boot. So I don't know whether he would see Hull City as a stepping stone currently, just because would any other club have gone for him? Do you know what I mean, in terms of the kind of, I don't know what his ideas are of, like, really kind of progressing in English football. I mean, Linus Slutsky, I could have kind of seen him thinking, I'll use Hull City as a stepping stone, just because he had a bit more kind of, maybe a longer managerial career. Obviously, that didn't go very well either. But I don't know whether that will be kind of Jakirovic's point of view. I kind of cynically think he might just be happy to come and manage in England, and think, no one else probably would have gone for him. And he probably couldn't wait to get out of the Turkish Super League, given how some of their last, games were going, with the fans kind of throwing objects onto the pitch. I suppose he probably kind of was quite happy to get out potentially.
Fletch, in terms of Adjun, this appointment's got to work, hasn't it? Because as I said before, this has been a really difficult year for him. With everything that's going on at Fenerbahce, he's getting a lot of criticism over there. Obviously, he's had a lot of criticism at Hull City as well for the way the last year's panned out. It was almost a humiliating catastrophe, wasn't it? Getting relegated, and he's acutely aware of the fan unrest, I think. But he needs this appointment to work, and the football club does. More importantly, the football club does, doesn't it? Because it cannot afford to have another season like last year. So the positive we're looking for is that Jakirovic, he comes in, he gets the players on side, he gets them playing, effective football. He's backed in the transfer market, can bring in, the players that they need to fill the very obvious holes in the squad. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out where they need to improve. But the owner, this has got to work for the owner, hasn't it? Because if this goes belly up and he's gone by Christmas, a bit like Volta, then it's where does the owner go then, isn't it? With the fans, particularly, because the fans are, he's not lost them. He's lost a few. He's not lost the fan base. The fan base still, I would say, as a whole, are backing him. But if this appointment goes wrong and they're awful next season and they're in a relegation battle again, it will turn, won't it?
Yeah, I think it will, because the level of trust will erode even further than, in some cases, from some people, what it is now. I think it's very split. I think that there's not many people on the fence for me regarding the situation of the Premiership of Adjun Ilıcalı at the moment, with this the scattergun transfer dealings previously and the chain of managers as well. Just wanted to add something to what KB said off the back from my discussion with the Croatian journalist, just for Jakirovic and the career path that he's been down, and it's perceived over on the continent to go from Bosnian football into Croatian football, then into Turkish football. This is another step up for Jakirovic. Now, it remains to be seen where he goes next, but this will, for him, be seen as a promotion in his managerial career, and whether he does want to use it as a stepping stone, then that's his choice. But I think what's pleasing about him is wherever he has been, if the level of intensity has increased on what the expectation is at his football club, he seems to have achieved it. I mean, he's had two very harsh sackings, as Kathryn's mentioned, the 9-2 against Bayern Munich. He was dismissed for that. He was sacked from Maribor because they lost to Coleraine in the Europa League. And I think he was unbeaten at the time as Maribor manager in the league. But they still got rid of him. And that's the clubs that he's been at before tend to have a steer towards what it is they do on the continent in cup competition in comparison to what they do in the league. So this will be interesting, I think, from Kayserispor. He's basically been brought in to get them out of a relegation hole, and they've moved up the table and they're now safe and sound as the season's finished. And he only lost 4 games in 17. So it really will be interesting to see how he goes. But I think what we can praise Adrian for in this instance is, we're talking about feeling. It proves that there's obvious care there for the football club in that he wants it to be successful. It's not a situation like at some other clubs where, look at Sheffield Wednesday. Their situation is absolutely dire at the moment.
It's tragic what's happening there.
It's absolutely horrendous what's going on there. There's other owners in the past who've had complete fallout with their fan bases. Cardiff City, Blackburn Rovers are a couple of examples there. So I think even if people dislike the political side of Adrian Ilagella when it comes to football, then he still holds the club at heart. And I think even if it's a situation where whether financially it's taking a downturn or there are problems going on behind the scenes for whatever reason, I think he still holds the club at heart, because there has been discussions that he cares more about Fenerbahce at this moment in time. But, I'm not trying to sound like a yes man for Adrian here, but I still look at what is being said and I still think there's plenty of passion and care there to try and make Hull City successful, despite the last couple of seasons of, going in the wrong direction from a league point of view.
Just on his coaching staff, because that's been a source of interest, of course. He's going to be bringing 3 people with him from Kayserispor, but they are people that he had previously, and they're Croatian-based. Marko Salatovic is the assistant. Marin Ivancic is one of the fitness coaches, and Angelo Roglic is works on the analysis side. So I think they're coming in to supplement. City have already got a core of people behind the scenes. Ryan and Josh in the analysis department, of Matt Busby on the fitness side, headed up by Andrew Balderston, who's the head of performance. It looks like they're going to come in and supplement what's already there. Obviously, you've got Andy Dawson. He was part of the coaching staff, but I think under Ruben. But I think Ruben, Toby Loveland, and James Oliver Pearce were very. That trio were very kind of cocooned in their own little world. You've also got Erbil Bozkurt as well, the goalkeeping coach, who will still be there, and they are in talks with another coach. There were 3 candidates. That's been whittled down to 2 now. British based, but British coaches that Jakirovic will decide. He will speak to them to decide who he wants. Kathryn, what do we feel about that? Is that a good thing to be basically shoehorning somebody in and be told to the new manager be told, right, yeah, you can. There's 2 people, you can pick one of them, but you're going to be having one person that you don't know, you've never worked with, but you're going to be having him. Or will it be? Is that a good thing for the manager to have another experienced member of staff particularly somebody that knows English football really, really well, will be well respected amongst players and staff and around the game. Where do you sit on that person? Because they are, however we dress it up, this extra coach is going to be shoehorned into the coaching staff.
Depends how Jakirovic takes it, doesn't it? Whether it's sort of like a person he sees forced upon him, or whether he sees it as a person that he can ask about English football if he's not sure on certain things. Somebody he can share ideas with, someone that can help guide him if there's things he's unsure about, or whether he sees it as somebody that he doesn't want and somebody that might try and interfere. I mean, I kind of view it as, it feels like almost kind of you're bringing in somebody with championship experience that if it all goes wrong and you do have to sack the manager, you've got somebody there that can take over potentially because he's not part of his coaching staff. So if it all goes to pot, then you've got somebody who can take over as caretaker manager. I mean, I'm not saying that's the kind of that's not the reason for it, but that's kind of what I've just almost got this picture in my mind of whoever it is. It's sort of like that's kind of what it feels like. I mean, hopefully Jakirovic doesn't kind of see it as somebody that's just sort of waiting to take over if he gets sacked. But that's kind of almost feels like, and I don't know whether that's kind of like an adjunct idea or if it's the people kind of advising him to sort of say you do need somebody with a bit of championship experience. It does kind of feel like Adjun always has people around him, advisors, and then doesn't necessarily always listen to them and just kind of, goes off and does what he wants to do anyway. So I will be intrigued to see how that plays out. I mean, hopefully it works, and hopefully it's kind of like whoever, because the fact that Jakirovic is picking one of them, maybe that the idea that he's got the control, hopefully he really likes one of them and they get on great and it all goes well. But yeah, part of me in the back of my mind would be thinking, is this kind of like a if it all goes wrong sort of thing? We've got somebody there that can kind of maybe help steady the ship if they need to.
Fletch, one obvious question though. In no particular order here, have they not got that already in Andy Dawson? And B, financially, can they afford an extra member of staff when you're going to have you've already got Andy Dawson? Yeah, Andy Dawson's there. Why would you? And I'm not trying to stir the pot here. I'm just I'm trying to play devil's advocate when you've got an experience. Yes, he's a club legend, but let's park that for a minute because that shouldn't guarantee anybody a job in football just because you're a club legend. Andy Dawson is a vastly experienced coach. He's well respected amongst players and staff. He's been around the club a long time. Yes, he worked in the academy. Now he's been part of the first team set up at the club for the last 2 or 3 years. Would you not incorporate Dawes, who could get on with anybody and would help anybody because he's just the most wonderful guy. He's got no agenda. He's part of the fabric of the football club that understands it. Would you not just look to utilise him in your coaching staff and tap into his incredible knowledge rather than bringing somebody in from outside and paying them, a huge amount of money, which you're going to, if we're honest, it's going to be because it's the championship. So everybody commands a huge amount of money.
Yeah, when you explain everything like that, it becomes quite strange as to why you would sideline Andy Dawson into a different position when we know full well how much he cares about the football club. We know what he's done for the football club, both as a player, as a youth coach, and as an actual coach. So for me, to be pure and simple, I think Dawson is the one that really they should be looking to. I suppose it's up to Dawson himself if that's what he wants. He might fancy a change just to, speculate. He might want to have a bit more involvement on the youth side. We don't know until, if he was to say it, then he will. But I totally get that. The thing with the number of coaches and all it, Brian Hughes said this to me during lockdown. We was playing Hull City, I think we're playing Shrewsbury. And there was a coach, I think, for nearly 4 players. So it was a really strange warm-up. Basically, Shrewsbury had a group of 4 defenders, group of 4 and everything was all segregated. And Brian Hughes actually said that it's actually good to have this number of coaches because if you have one coach who's talking to 10 players, for example, that actually maybe dilutes how much individual feedback you can give each player. Whereas if you've got a lot of coaches, they're able to maybe speak more individually on certain things. So I think it's different strokes for different folks, really. But going back to Dawson, I don't see why Dawson shouldn't be in that first team position. And if he is being moved into a different position, then I'm sure we'll find out why when Adjan calls his press conference, because to be fair to Adjan, he likes to be detailed and he likes to say exactly what's going on with each individual person, and there's no real guard to it, is there? No,
Kathryn, just finally on the coaching setup, before we move on to recruitment, what's kind of your closing remarks on Dawson and the appointment of somebody else?
Yeah, I think you summed it up quite well, Baz. I mean, obviously, I don't know who the 2 candidates are, whether they're really, really experienced assistant coaches. I do think, as you kind of mentioned, Dawson knows the club so well. He knows kind of, what it means to play for the club and work for the club, and he's got that connection, I think, importantly with the players. I think he's somebody that's been there a long time. The squad that have been there, the ones that have been at the club for a few years, they probably get on quite well with him, and he can be, he's probably a good go-between between the players and the coaching staff. Maybe that's something that they don't necessarily think they need anymore, but I do worry that too much change, taking out the manager and then taking out someone in Dorsey who could have been potentially popular with the squad is a bit of a risk. But hopefully the fact that he's still there, it's good that he's still at the club and still in a role, and hopefully it's one that he feels valued in as much as he has done previously.
Fletch, before we get on to recruitment, just what are the fans saying?
Yeah, I was just about, I'll bring them in now because there's a couple of bridges we can build from some people asking about transfers, that kind of thing, but it relates to Sergej Jakirovic. From what we've discussed already, BBFM says, from what we said at the top, what is the obsession with Championship English football experience? I don't understand why fans will completely write people off before they even arrive. I'm just hoping we get some players in for him to start pre-season and give him the best chance. We've boxed off who the other candidates were. Harvey JB24 asks, and we'll address this in a minute, what's the situation with the returning loan players? Will Sergej give them the chance, or will they be heading straight back out on loan? Oliver Harsley says, very interested to know what Adjan's actual expectations will be for the upcoming season, whether he'd be able to accept a mid-table finish. Danny McDonald asks, do we expect many signings in before the players come back for pre-season? I'd be wanting at least 4. And Tom Lehman asks, and I think this is the first person we can really talk about, is why are we selling Drame? He's the best right back at the club, in my opinion. So what's going on there, Baz?
Yeah, so we'll get into recruitment then. So Drame is an interesting one, isn't he? I think there's 8 or 9 clubs wanting to sign him. City, from what I've been told, aren't actively trying to sell Cody Drame, but if they got a figure, let's talk figures. I think if they got upwards of £1 million, they'd probably have a conversation. My question, and I wrote this overnight, is if City have got a player here, and yes, they need to raise funds. That much is obvious. We've talked about that a lot before. We know that the club need to raise funds to be able to pay off some bills, but also to strengthen the squad this summer. If they've got a player there that so many clubs want, does somebody not sit down and go, hang on a minute, have we got a better player here than we perhaps realised? I'm not trying to be Cody Drame's agent, and I don't think he's been. I think at times this season he's not been great. I mean, a couple of mistakes led to goals, but he started very few games. He started even less at his natural right back. Obviously, Louis Coyle's club skipper, and has been a firm favourite of pretty much every manager since he signed for the club in the summer of 2020, or 2021 in the League One season. So, but perhaps is there a better player there than we have so far seen? I know he was a signing, from what I gather, that was kind of teed up last January. Liam Rosenior wanted him, and the deal was still done in the summer. And I know Liam is obviously at Strasbourg and still retains an interest in him. Rangers in Scotland, Russell Martin would like to take him there, I think. We know there's interest from Derby and Preston in the Championship. And Blackburn have been linked, as have Watford. So there's a lot. I think there's a couple of other teams in France in addition to Strasbourg. So he's one, but there's so much interest in other players. I think obviously we know about Steven Alzate and Gustavo Puerta. I think they're two players they'd look to potentially move on because they can get money for them. There's been interest, as there was last summer in Regan Slater. I'd be loath to lose a player of Regan's versatility and calibre. You mentioned the returning loan players, so you've got first of all, Matty Jacob looks like he's going out. There's Bolton are pushing hard for a permanent deal there. A couple of other clubs, I think one in Switzerland. So Kathryn, you might see him actually potentially when you go out there for the Euros. You've got obvious interest in Xavier Simons. That would be a permanent exit. I think Hibernian in Scotland are one of the clubs looking at him. I think those two could, it was said that those two could be on the way this week. Marvin Malum did quite well in Paderborn in Germany. I think they had an obligation to buy Malum if they got promoted back into the Bundesliga, but that didn't happen. So it remains to be seen whether Malum has a future. I mean, funnily enough, he ended the season as the joint top assist maker with Abu Kamara with 3, and he left in January. That probably tells its own story. Anthony Ricciotti, but then Chris Beddy also was only 3 goals behind João Pedro, and he also left in January. Anthony Ricciotti went out to Köln in Germany. They won promotion, but he didn't play. I think he played 1 reserve game. They're not interested, so he's coming back. I think they'll look to move him on. You've got other players like James Furlong, won promotion with AFC Wimbledon. Andy Smith was at Gillingham, so they'll come back. It's hard to imagine how they're going to feature, really. And then obviously the big one is Ryan Giles, isn't it? You've got a £4 million asset there. Can the new manager find a way to integrate Gilo, or does he move on? Obviously, Borough is now dead in the water, given Carrick was sacked and Jonathan Woodgate was sacked last week. It was those two. It was Woody and Carrick that drove that deal to get Gilo back to Borough. They've gone. That isn't going to happen anymore. So, so there's a lot of decisions there. There's also João Pedro. I know they activated his deal, but the feeling was that he wants to move somewhere else and move away from English football. So there's a lot up in the air.
Can I bring a comment in which I think might help mould a question? City Rich says, never seen the best of Giles, Abdush, Drame, Palmer, etc.
Oh, Abdush, yeah, sorry, he's another one. Abdush is another one, yeah. Abdush is, I missed him off my list, on this list. Abdush is coming back, not a great spell at Rizespor in Turkey, but I think, again, the feeling is probably that he will move back to Turkey. So, yeah, sorry, I interrupted you, but I did forget.
No, that's fine. City Rich says that a fully fit, well-managed squad looks half decent in his eyes with who they have right now. So, and I think the consensus that I'm getting from the comments here is they're trying to avoid, that fans want to avoid a churn again. Fans don't want to see 10 out, 10 in on this occasion. And looking at when Jakirovic has been in his previous jobs, it looks like the transfer dealings haven't been as big an overhaul before, but that might just be because he's been at clubs that have been at the top of the tree and they only need to fine-tune things. So the question I'd put to you before we delve into more into the individual players is, how happy would we be with players coming in and players going out? Because it is difficult. I think we haven't seen the best of quite a lot of these players. I still think, Ryan Giles as a left back, yes, there's the backstory to him, in that it sounded like he probably wanted to go previously, but there's still a quality left back there who on paper has proven that he can deliver at the top end of the Championship with certain people around him.
Yeah, I think so. It's all about system. It's horses for courses, isn't it? But it's systems. Gilo's, I like him. I think he's a great character. He's the sort of character you need around. And I think there is a player there. Clearly there's a player there, but for whatever reason, Hull City haven't been able to get it out of him. And equally, he didn't really show it in the second half of the season when he went back to Borough, and he wasn't first choice. But it's up to managers. Managers need to find a way to get the best out of players, and players need to find a way to get the best out of themselves. I I don't think it needs massive churn, but I think there are some gaping holes in that squad. Obviously, up front is, we talked about this a year ago. That I think of the 66, don't quote me on the figures because it's a long time ago, but I think of the 66, 68 goals Liam Rosenior's team scored in that championship season, I think they lost like 63 of them, and there are only 5 or 6 goals left in the squad when pre-season started. Now, they've ended the season as the most impotent team in the championship with 44 goals in 46 games. It doesn't, and we just talked about Malin being joint top assist maker with 3, and he left in January. It doesn't take, again, we know what they need, don't we, Kathryn? That is the key. We talked about this the night before Portsmouth, didn't we? You've got the, we know what they need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the players, Malin, I forgot he still played for us, to be honest. I forgot he was still here, like some of the names that you mentioned coming back. I'm surprised as many as 8 to 9 clubs would be interested in Cody James based. It can't be based off what he did for us last season. That must be kind of based off previous. So that makes me think, well, what did we do to him? Why did we not get this kind of potential out of him if these amount of clubs think he's got that within his locker? Because I just didn't see it on a consistent basis.
No, absolutely.
And I know, and I'm not saying that like that was all down to him, position wise, he probably wasn't kind of playing where he wanted to play, but I just kind of didn't see that. So that makes me think, well, what did we do wrong, or what did the managers do wrong to not get this kind of potential that others seem to think kind of exists there out of him. Ryan Giles, I think, yeah, we've spoken about him before. It's just sort of like he's got quality in there, but it hasn't shown it enough for us. Maybe lost a bit of goodwill with the fans potentially because of how the 2 transfer windows played out, and maybe a perceived kind of lack of what's the word, passion, maybe a perceived kind of lack of wanting to give his all for the club when he was there for the first half of the season. I don't know how accurate that is, but it was kind of perceived as maybe his head kind of wasn't fully in it. But like you said, the key is scoring goals, and it's not just someone to put the ball in the back of the net. If Malam's joint top of assists, and I forgot he played for us, that's not a good stat. So it's not just about someone to score the goals; it's about creativity. And I do think someone like Matt Crooks, if you can get the best out of him, could have a good season. Again, it was somebody that wasn't kind of consistent when he came in, but did kind of, you always thought he could pop up with a goal at some point. Same with kind of Casey Palmer off the bench, sometimes looked good. When he started games, he seemed to struggle. I do think they need at least 2 or 3, maybe 4 players in those attacking areas in terms of a striker and attacking midfielder. But it felt like we had loads of attacking midfielders at one point, but they just kind of haven't, obviously, we've not managed to get the best out of them for whatever reason.
Let's not forget though that there's people like Miller and Bellumi who will come back into this squad as well. Richard Eglin asks on some of the incoming players, one that he doesn't mention, which we'll come on to in a minute. He wants to know about the Moroccan player, but Bill Robbins is being a greedy bugger and wants to know about McBurney, Zambrano, Louis Barry, and Joe Geldart. 4 courses in one.
Right, so let's go McBurney. McBurney is, from what I was told, was really, really keen to come. Now, there is interest from Sheffield United, but I don't think that's as strong as what I know. Sheffield United put some stuff out on their social media last week around his birthday, and everybody kind of took that as well. He's definitely going back to Blades. He was playing golf in Sheffield as well with some of the old players. I think some of his old teammates. I think McBurney's there. They really want McBurney. They really, really want him. And I think McBurney is indicated that he really wants to come. I think Crooks and Egan have been on to him as well. But I think that will rest on conversations with the new manager. Jakirovic does tend to like a powerful forward, doesn't he? Obviously, he had Emreli at Zagreb, who's out of contract at Nuremberg, I think so. That would be a free transfer and relatively risk-free. 27-year-old who's got a decent scoring record, Azerbaijan international. I still think they'll look at wingers, or like they are looking at wingers. Abu Kamara had an okay season, but he was never signed as the frontline winger. He was signed, and we talked about this on the pod before, that you've got Miller and Bellumi with the frontline wingers, and Abu Kamara was signed as kind of a player they thought they could develop and give and drip feed, a bit like Abdush when he signed last January, because you've got Carvalho. It was felt that Abdush could be given time to kind of grow and into the club. Obviously, that didn't happen with Kamara because of their respective injuries. But wingers, they want pacey wingers. It remains to be seen, where Miller and Bellumi are at. Obviously, they're 7 months or so into their recovery, 6-7 months. But expecting them to come back and hit the ground running and be your frontline forwards when the season starts, that might be a big ask. Obviously, you've got Elliot Matazo, the midfielder, coming back a bit later than that because of his ACL. But McBurney is the one they really want. Where were we? Sorry, what was Big Bill Robbins saying? It was McBurney.
Zambrano is another one that's been asked by a few people, but then Louis Barry and Joe Geldart. Yeah, so
let's go. Zambrano talks are ongoing, and I kind of feel that probably will get done at some point. But obviously, he can't play. He's not allowed. He's not allowed to train with either Hull City or Quito in Ecuador. So he's training alone with a personal fitness instructor. So even if he signed today, he wouldn't be eligible to play until November the 3rd. Obviously, you've got to imagine he's been sidelined for a whole year, and he's not trained at that. It's all right training with 1-to-1, but that you can't replicate the intensity of a first team training session in your back garden with a fitness coach. So even if he came back, you wouldn't be seeing him until Christmas time probably. Louis Barry, they had obviously, we reported this in January. They had talks about getting him back in the summer. At that point, he recovered from his knee injury, but I think I think I'm right in saying when they expected him back at the end of the season, he had some problem with his other knee, so isn't going to be back in training until the back end of pre-season, and that's quite an expensive deal. So I'd be surprised if we saw Louis Barry back. And Joe Gelhardt is another one where the original figures quoted for Gelhardt were ridiculous. We're talking £6-7 million. Now Leeds have lowered their asking price, I think, to around 3. The problem with that, which you might feel is more manageable, but then his salary is doubled because of their Premier League, because they've won promotion. So let's say, I think if you imagine most Championship players are on about 20 grand a week. If you were to say Joe Gelhardt was on 20 grand a week, which is a club like Leeds United, I don't think is 20, 25, 30 grand a week is not beyond the realms of possibility. If you've suddenly doubled that, you're talking 55, 60 grand for Gelhardt, which is just obscene. And nobody in the Championship is going to pay. And I love Joe, and he was great, but his goal record doesn't. Nobody in the Championship is going to be taking on a salary of 50 to 60k a week for a player that is not prolific, as hard working as he is. So, I know people laugh at Don Goodman and the bits and pieces he says, but he was bang on. I think he said a couple of weeks ago that 3 million for Gelhardt is still too much. You're talking 1.52 at absolute tops, and I think that would probably be right. So, I think that's unlikely at this stage. A lot of things are going to have to. The player I would be going, and I know I mentioned Toffolo before. I don't think that's realistic personally. He's obviously they've had interest in Toffolo before at Forest, and he turned them down a couple of Januaries ago. The one for me I'd be going for is Lewis O'Brien, because he's got a year left at Forest. He's not involved. He finished the season at Swansea. He was brilliant for Swansea. And if you're going to lose one or both of Alzati and Puerta, I'd be going all out for Lewis O'Brien at 26, 27. Great age, got a lot of experience. We'll have to see how that one plays out. But he'd be top of my list if I was looking to sign a midfielder. Kathryn, any thoughts?
I just said Fletch.
Fletch froze again then.
What's the obsession with Zambrano? Given everything you've just said, I know it's it's a player that they clearly like, but does any part of you just think, is that not just a bit too difficult? Should they not just kind of cut the losses there? I mean, are they just wasting kind of, like you say, if he's not going to have played for so long? Is he good enough to wait that long for? I mean, I'm happy to be told, yes, he is good enough to wait that long. But I just sort of think, is that really a kind of a priority to get done when we don't know when we might see him next? On the other note, I think Ollie McBurney would be a great signing in terms of somebody that is proven themselves at the championship level if they could get him.
Yeah, I think in terms of Zambrano, I think there's a player there, and I think they see the pound signs. If we can get him in, if we can get him on the cheap because of his doping situation, we can turn him. We can turn him around in 6 months, 12 months, and get if we can sign him for, because of everything, we can sign him for £500,000. Maybe we can flip him and sell him on for 3 million and 4 million. In he was likened, wasn't he, to Caicedo a couple of years ago. Whether that's pie in the sky or not, we don't know. But I think they see it as an investment that if we can get him on the cheap because of the situation, get him playing some games, he's clearly a talented boy, and then we can flip him on. Fletch.
Yeah, I didn't think we really saw the best of Zambrano from the system that Volta played. I think. Well,
he had 6 games in fairness.
He was never really. He had 6 games. He never really got the ball in those 6 games. Like his number of passes he had in comparison.
It was like that, wasn't it? They didn't play. They never played through midfield, so it was kind of harsh for the midfielders. Can
we really quickly talk about the Moroccan centre half, who sounds like he's coming at centre midfielder even? Lalou Louis, I think his surname.
Yeah, 20-year-old Moroccan midfielder.
Love that.
Fletch,
anything else?
Are you there, Fletch?
Well, it
looks like it's going to get done. I think it's a development signing. I think there's one or two lads that are looking at development signings, but whether he's 20, isn't he? So whether he's going to come in and have any impact on the first team, I'd be surprised. I think it's more of a development signing. But yeah, it looks like it's going to get done. It's one of those, isn't it? The squad has got potential if they keep it. But it depends on. I still think there's going to be a lot of. What they've signed since Adjun bought the club in January 2022, they've signed 64 players. So I just don't see that changing. I don't see suddenly it being a really calm summer where you get 3 or 4 in and maybe 4 or 5 out off the wage. But I just think we're going to be. I think come the 1st of September at 7:15 when the window's closed or slammed shut as the window does. We're going to be looking at it with 8, 9, 10 signings again because I just that's how this club operates, and I just don't see it changing. But I don't think they need a huge amount of defense. I think they need some support defensively, but I don't think they need a huge amount. Obviously, left back is obvious that is an area that they've got to figure out. I think in midfield, if you were going into midfield into the season with Regan, Alzate, Puerta, Palmer, and Matazo coming back, I think you'd go, okay, there's probably enough in there. With the players you've already got, and then you're looking going forward. But going forward, we defensively under Ruben, he made them really solid. The fact that the stat we put out so many times that only they were the 4th best defensive record in the league from Ruben taking over behind Leeds, Sheffield United, and Burnley. It was at the other end, and that is where they, if they're going to have a good season next year, they've got to get players in that can score goals. McBurney's, I agree with Kathryn. I think McBurney's a good signing. He's a something house that I think they need in their team, and he's not prolific, but I think if he can stay fit, he's had his troubles. If he can stay fit, he would be a very good signing, particularly on a free transfer. But they've got to get creative. They've got to get creativity in the team, and they've got to get players in the team that can score goals. So that's the biggest challenge, isn't it, Kathryn?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And it's all good and well, sort of, if you bring someone like McBurney in, but you've got to also have the players to provide for him as well. As we were kind of saying, it's not just about somebody to score the goals; it's about somebody to create them as well. But I do think he is the type of player that they should be going after. And my only kind of other comment about him was I couldn't believe how quickly he learned Spanish. Do you know when he went over to where was it was he playing? It was some sort of
Las Palmas.
Las Palmas.
And I saw this video of him doing an interview after the game in Spanish, and I was incredibly impressed. And it changed my mind about him because I do remember when I think he sort of half played a role in can't remember the player now. It was when Rossini was in charge. He sort of half played a role in getting one of our players sent off, and I then had
Tete at Bramall Lane.
That was a clear example, wasn't it? Clear example of why he's a house built of swearware-based substances.
You want someone like that on your team. You don't want to play against someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I know we're pushed for time. We're already past an hour. So we'll wait to find out when we get this announcement. Just quickly on pre-season, because I know there's been a lot of questions about it. So City have confirmed 2 of them so far. Away at Stockport, which was a great away day, July the 26th. So that'll be the first domestic game that fans can go to watch. And obviously Sunderland at the MKM the following Saturday. I think there will be a home game, I think, on the final weekend. Obviously, that's usual. The final weekend before the season starts. That's not been announced yet. I think they'll play a couple of training games behind closed doors, and there will be 2 games out in Turkey. They're going back to Riva, the Turkish HQ. I think they've got the main pitch again this season, which is quite something. The stadium training pitch. So they'll play two games out there. I think the Wednesday they fly out on the Sunday. They're out there for 7 days. They fly out Sunday, come back Sunday, the 13th and the 20th. I think they'll play a game on the Wednesday and the Saturday, but that's not confirmed yet. So we'll have to wait and see. So I think we've covered it. We've been at it for an hour and 6 minutes. I think we've covered a fair amount there, haven't we, folks?
I'd like to think so. I mean,
how
much of it was substantial, I don't know. Right. But there we go.
Not much of it. Have we covered the manager? Did we get to that bit?
I think so. Yeah. I think what's his name? I'm
not sure. Sergej Jakirovic.
That's the one.
Right. So we'll leave it there, folks. Thank you for. I know. Thanks to everybody that's been getting in touch and saying, "Where the hell are you?" But here we are. We were here for an hour, and no doubt we'll be here again when there's white smoke emanating from the rooftops in East Yorkshire. But Kathryn, good luck. And I've not heard of any England players retiring on your watch in the time we've been recording.
No, thankfully not. But never say never.
Absolutely. Thank you for popping by. Fletch, it's been good to see you.
Cheers, mate. It's been good to see your lovely face too.
Oh, lovely.
I like the fact, by the way, we haven't picked up on it. Why have you changed from Sky Sports to BBC News on your television behind? Is that a boycott because Prutz has 3 months off?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a boycott because they've got rid of the football show on Sky for some YouTubers. I'm not keen on that. I like the football show.
So now you've gone for international politics by the looks of things.
Oh, let's not get into that. It's just
no.
I thought I'd put BBC One on for bargain on and Cash in the Attic, and I've obviously got BBC. I've got it wrong, and I'll figure it out. But yeah, I'm in protest at Sky because of getting rid of the football show. I'm not happy about that.
Something's breaking behind you, Baz, so you might need to go and cross it because you might end up going to America again to do one of your lovely little reviews that you do.
Oh yeah, I'd love that. To be fair,
did that pizza story in Chicago ever come out?
I've been nominated for an award for it, so bizarrely, I can't believe that. But yeah. Anyway, let's move on because things are moving on. Thanks everybody for watching and getting in touch and all your comments and questions. As I say, big love to Burnsy. Hope he's getting better, and we will see you again soon. Thanks everybody.